Are you trying to finish your own animated project or a passion project? But hold up, what does it mean to be done? What does it mean to have a finished project? What is a finished project? Hey guys, this is Nico Pintoa, and today I'd like to talk about what is considered a finished animated project, or a passion project that's not related to animation but requires many steps to get a finished product. And this was quite a controversial topic when I was still at animation school. Before I got accepted into CalArts, the films that were coming out from that school were mostly pencil tests. They were black and white mostly, they weren't fully colored, they were really rough. It looked like you were just looking at pencil tests or a behind the scenes of an animated movie. And I guess you have to think about that time period. You know, Disney was opening its doors for Princess and the Frog, so they were looking for qualified 2D animators. So you saw a lot of student films that had that very Disney 2D animation pencil test look. So when I attended, of course, the climate of animation work was quite different. But besides that, we were also introduced to a slew of digital tools that allowed us to finish our films in a more processed quality. So that means cleanup and color and utilizing fully finished backgrounds along with fully composited visuals. I mean, when I was a first year at CalArts, we were still shooting our pencil tests on VHS tapes. We didn't have a digital downshooter till maybe the fall of 2011. And now that we had digital tools, students had more autonomy to have more finished looking films. And because of this, it kind of shifted the way CalArts taught how to make films, how to think about the film as a whole project rather than just a reel to show what you're good at. There were new classes instilled in the program, digital tools as well as film workshop classes where they mostly focused on students trying to get their film done with these new standards. So I'm mostly going to be talking about animated projects since that's my specialty, and maybe this applies to another interest of yours, okay? So I've heard a lot of different opinions of what is considered a finished film. Some schools will say it's a film with full color, clean lines, has finished looking backgrounds, it's in between, it's hit all these milestones of a production. Some people will say it's broadcast quality. Some people will argue the story has a clear end and beginning rather than a vignette that starts in the middle and ends in a bigger part of a story. Some will argue that it's all about length of the project. Whether you agree or disagree with all of these opinions, what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of different opinions of what people consider a finished project. Now, when I was at CalArts, we were transitioning from films that look like a collection of pencil tests to films that look like a production company or a small studio could have been involved with it. And this kind of affected the criteria of what would get in our school's producer show. And for those who don't know, there's usually two screenings for our school. There's the open show where all student films are submitted and it all plays together. And then there's the producer show screening where the faculty selects the films that best represent the school and put them in a screening that's catered for people in studios or people who are recruiters, directors. And it started a conversation of what kind of films went into these shows. Were they finished films? Were they films that highlighted a specialty or a specific skill that the student has? Is it now a little film festival compared to a student showcase reel? And of course, the faculty that decided which films would get into these shows, they were always butting heads because some of the faculty or some of the teachers, some teachers and faculty favored films that had great stories. Some teachers and faculty favored films that had great design, color, and visual development. And some teachers favored films that had great character animation, performance, and movement. Some of the faculty wanted the school to have students that came out as independent experimental filmmakers, and then there was another side where they wanted the students to get jobs at the leading major studios. I remember being told that the school was trying to shorten the producer show screening time because back in the past they used to be very, very long. And now that we've introduced digital tools where students can finish a fully polished looking film, I'm pretty sure the criteria and the standard of what films could go to this producer show screening would also be affected and compromised. So one thing you have to remember, and one thing that you should really hold to high heart, is animation is a diverse medium with many different approaches, different styles, different philosophies. So it leads to a whole library of different types of animation you can get exposed to. Now, with that being said, the CalArts faculty decided that a finished film is what the student or what the artist set out to accomplish. So let's say I decided to make a film that was black and white and it was just fully animated pencil tests, no color, no cleaned up drawings. It's really rough, but it feels really solid. And if I said this would be the finished version of my film, or the thing that I set out to do for my thesis film, then that would be considered a finished project. So let's say you wanted to make a visual development film where it's very beautifully painted, but let's say the animation is way more limited, less drawings, less in-betweens, there's a lot of held poses, but very, very strong layout. And if that's what you set out to do for your finished film, then that is considered a finished film. So if I were to summarize it, whatever you set out to do as your project, and once you hit that stage and you call it done, you call it quits, I think you can argue that's a finished project. And that's something that I strongly agree with. Another example is, let's say you set out to do a storyboard animatic. It's black and white, there's not a lot of animation, it's, a lot of key poses, some breakdowns here and there. It's meant to tell a story from beginning to end, or a piece, maybe it's longer than 4 minutes, whatever, and that's what you set out to do. That's your main project, and once you wrap that up, it's done. Then yeah, that would be considered a finished project. Another thing that I would add is everything feels consistent. So every part of the project feels consistent to each other. So if, let's say I'm talking about animation, all the shots have the same quality or level of work. Regardless of what the story is, how it looks, how it moves, and you decide, hey, whatever I have in mind is going to be the finished project, and it shows in that film, it's considered done. And again, this stuff doesn't just apply to animation, it applies to illustration. It also applies to something like comics. That's why setting a compromise or knowing your limitation is good to have. I think if I were to add a personal opinion, I would say something that could stand alone if you were just to present it by itself. So let's talk about what makes a project feel unfinished or incomplete. And this was something that the faculty was also trying to talk about, which was maybe the film felt really inconsistent in terms of its production stage. So an example of this is, you have a film, some shots are fully animated, and then you get a shot that has just rough animation, and then some shots are just thumbnails of storyboards. So the big takeaway is the inconsistency of production stages. Because when you show this to an audience, they'll say, hey, I'm watching a work in progress of something rather than something that just feels like its own thing. Or I'm watching abandonware. So as much as I could say that, hey, you could have a film that's just storyboards and that's what you set out to do, you can watch a film that's pretty much just an animatic compared to a film that has a few animated shots, some storyboards, some thumbnails, some fully colored shots, and maybe it just ends abruptly. I would say the animatic that feels way more limited in the production value, everything feels consistent, it wraps up nicely, feels way more complete than a film that's inconsistent. And again, I'm talking about some shots feel finished, some shots don't feel finished, or whatever. So one big takeaway here that I want to share is that with art projects or passion projects, they are finished when you decide it is finished. So there's that whole Leonardo da Vinci quote, art is never finished, only abandoned. And this resonates with me very well because I tend to have a perfectionism attitude to my work. I am very OCD when it comes to my work. So it's led me to redoing shots over and over again, rewriting stuff, rebooting stuff, or just canceling a project and never finishing it. So it's led me to have a lot of incomplete projects. So you really have to have a full understanding of a deadline, knowing that when you hit this date or this time, it's time to put the pencils down no matter what. Or that you know that when you hit a certain stage in the project, you can now finish it up. So let's talk about a passion project, or in this case, an animated project. So an advice that I would give is treat each step or each stage of the process as their own project by itself. So let's say you're making a short animated film. Finish the script of it and treat the screenplay as the final product and just focus on that step. And from there, you can move on to a different project if you'd like, or you could say, hey, you know what? I'm on a roll. I want to continue working on this project. Then you can start a new personal project. You can start making a storyboard or an animatic for it and see if you can make something that is considered finished as an animatic. It can stand alone as a watchable animatic. And after you finish that, you can decide that's your finished product, or you can decide, hey, now I have the foundation of this film done, then I can move on to layout, and then animation, and then backgrounds, and then coloring and cleanup. And again, each step can be its own project. If you just want to finish a lot of things, consider small projects that are easy to do, something that's not super ambitious. Instead of trying to fully animate a 1-minute short, maybe just do storyboards of it and, wrap it up with that. I remember when I was working on Tiny Nomad, I didn't think that I would be able to have a fully composited, fully colored looking film. Just because of the length of the film and how tight the deadline was, I was considering just making a film that looked like pencil tests with very, very rough backgrounds. But, I think I made it ahead of schedule, so I was able to color the characters and I was able to whip out really fast, loose backgrounds within a week. I avoided doing backgrounds and colors before I finished the lion animation. I wanted to have the lion animation done before I moved any step further. I still wanted to showcase that my priorities lied within animation and storyboarding, so color and the final look was not really a main priority. If I had all the shots and lion animation done, and it all stayed consistent, I'd be happy with that. One thing that I don't want to do is that I'm animating the film, but I'm still figuring out the story, I'm still figuring out the character design, I'm still figuring out the look, but I'm still making the film, and that would just drive me nuts. My creative energy would be drained. I don't know if I told you guys this, but I was boarding a 35-minute short film all to myself, and the animatic is done. It's video edited, there's voice acting, it's timed out, the animatic exists. But by the time I had finished the animatic, I realized it wasn't a story that I wanted to continue. I kind of grew out of it, I matured out of it, and I thought it was best to abandon it. Now, even though I wasn't happy with the final outcome of that project, I was more than satisfied because I had finished a whole stage. A first pass of just storyboards of a 35-minute film is a huge accomplishment. Even though I'll never fully animate it or fully finish it, at least I've done my part and now I can move on. And the last piece of advice that I would want to give is, who cares what people think is considered a finished film? It's all up to you to decide whether to end a project and move on. Who cares if it's prestigious worthy or festival worthy or, whatever. Do what you can in all your power to just have something that's consistent, finished, and just wrap it up. Because the truth at the end of the day is all projects are abandoned. It's just how you decide to wrap it up and present it. Anyways, that's all. Bye. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.